Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 36, I've Got a Secret. Before we jump into the summary, we'd like to thank you for your patience. We'd also like to tell you why this episode is late, but it's a secret.
And unlike Maxwell and Fran, we can keep it.
This episode starts on a dark and stormy night while the children are watching a horror film. While going to answer the door, Niles explains that in classic horror films, violence is never shown, as there's nothing scarier than an unopened door. Opening the door, he reveals a trench coat wearing visitor whose face is entirely bandaged, hiding their identity. Fran quickly learns that the house guest is a celebrity recovering from some surgery, but Maxwell refuses to tell her the visitor's name. She tries to get the information from Cece, but learns that Maxwell hasn't trusted her with that information either. Maxwell walks in on Cece attempting to hack into his laptop and then kicks Fran out of his office. As she leaves, his filing cabinet trails behind, attached to her skirt. Meanwhile, Brighton brings home his friend's parrot, whose speaking capabilities are limited to Raymond loves Lola. Still curious to know who the celebrity is, Fran breaks into the guest room to snoop on the sleeping guest. Maxwell catches her, and the house guest identifies herself as Cher. Fran promises Maxwell she can keep the secret, but then Val, in one of her few moments of mental acuity, figures out Cher's identity. The press, having caught wind of Cher's recovery, has surrounded the Sheffield home. Fran takes the blame for Val having told her priest about the guest. Thinking creatively, Fran devises a plan to help Cher escape by relying on cousin Ira's Cher impersonation. With Cher safely out of the house, Maxwell chides Fran about the dangers of idle female gossip, only to learn that Raymond, of Raymond Loves Lola, tipped off the press as payback for Maxwell gossiping about his girlfriend whose apartment Raymond had decorated entirely in leather. Bernadette, is there anything you'd like to add to that summary?
Nope, that was a great summary.
Thank you, as always. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes, as you mentioned in your summary, it is a dark and stormy night at the Sheffield residence. All three children are in the living room watching an old movie. I'm assuming The Mummy. And, it's dark. They're watching it intently. And of course, behind the couch, Fran comes up with a flashlight and scares them.
Boom!
And this happens, of course, after Brighton had made some remarks about, oh, this isn't scary. It's just what's so scary about a guy in Egypt being wrapped up in Charmin,
Right.
as in toilet paper. And that's when Fran sneaks up, boo, they scream. And Fran kind of laughs and she's like, oh, I love to do that to my ma, growing up. Thank God for plastic slip covers.
Right.
Um, and then, Fran inquires to Gracie, like, Gracie, isn't this a bit much for you? And she's like, no, this is fine. It's 60 minutes I can't take. Have you seen what they do in chicken processing plants?
Right.
At that time, Niles comes in with a very large box of pizza. And Fran takes it happy they've ordered pizza because with this particular pizza, it comes with a beverage. That beverage being the excess grease that comes out of it.
Correct.
Poured into a cup.
I've never seen anyone take a pizza box, tilt it, and get oil out like that.
Nope, I have never seen that either. And so, they're going for the pizza. Maggie's just going to get one slice, and Fran's like, oh, yeah, me too. But what Fran actually does is she takes two slices and puts it and stacks them so
Yep.
that you can eat them both at the same time. And of course, Maggie's like, that's not one slice. And Fran's like, it is when you eat it like this. The body doesn't know.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then they start talking about other kind of horror films. I didn't catch the title of the next movie. Did you happen to? But it's essentially one of the horror films that takes place like in a cabin in the woods.
Well, I
Uh,
didn't catch the name, but I remember Brighton saying something about how the old films are so unrealistic. And
yeah,
Fran says, I think that's where you're going.
yeah. So Brighton's the one who says, the old horror films are so unrealistic. And Fran's like, oh, as if, everybody who goes out to a cabin in the woods and immediately takes off their shirt and starts dancing or whatever. And of course, Brighton responds with, oh, we should go camping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Niles points out that, in the older movies, it used to be in horror films that the violence was never done on the screen. And he says, how Alfred Hitchcock said that the, is it essentially the scariest door is the one not opened or something
Nothing
like
more frightening there's nothing more frightening than an unopened door.
Yeah, and of course, that's when there's the doorbell ring and he's opening the door to reveal dramatically
Yes.
a person whose entire head is wrapped up in bandages and they have sunglasses on
The hat.
and a hat. Yeah. And of course I believe there's lightning at that time too. Very dramatic.
The timing is perfect.
Yeah, and Maxwell follows in the person and the Maxwell's going to get the person settled and he's just casually, the kids have already left the room, I think, at this point, and
Yeah, I think they screamed and ran.
yeah, and so, but Maxwell's acting as if, oh, this is normal, and
Correct.
so, I think Niles is leading the mysterious person upstairs to the guest room, and Maxwell's just like, oh, good night, Miss Fine, and she, of course, is like, good night, Miss Fine, like, is isn't there anything more you want to tell me? And he's like, pleasant dreams. See you in the morning.
Right.
And and then she's like, well, what about the King Tut in the trench coat? And again, it's a house guest, and Maxwell's obviously not wanting to divulge who it is, but Fran's attempting to get it out of him. And at one point, he whispers in her ear and she says, what does hell freezing over have to do with this? Oh, you're not going to tell me, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And she's like, well, you trust me with your kids. You trust me to deliver important documents because Maxwell had given her a letter or, an envelope. And at that point, she stuffs the envelope in her in her shirt, like near her breasts.
Yep.
But you don't trust me with this? And he's like, yep. And Maxwell starts talking about the classic of like, she's none of your business. Um, I don't know if it's here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie. Is this where he also talks about like why is it that women are always trying to get into
That's
other
later.
people's but okay, then I'll stop there. Uh, and Fran though is still trying to wheedle out that information and she's like, well, I know she's not a redhead. How do you know she's not a redhead? Aha! And she's like, you're way over your head with this, Mr. Sheffield. Why don't you just tell me? And he's like, this is actually just strengthening, my
Basically, you're proving my case.
yeah, well, he's now even less likely to tell her. And then he there's a phone, a phone call. Did Fran say Larry Martinsky?
I didn't catch the name.
Okay. But basically she's like, "Oh, there's a phone call for you, Mr. Sheffield, like in your office." He goes out and she kind of goes, "Liz." And is that a reference to Elizabeth Taylor or am I just totally making stuff up?
I mean, that's a reasonable
Okay.
guess.
But then of course immediately Maxwell pops his head back into the living room to say hello to your mother for me. And of course it's Fran's mother, Sylvia, on the phone, not whoever Fran claimed it to be.
Correct.
So yeah, do you want to add anything to that?
The one thing I guess I wanted to note, we've both mentioned that it's a dark and stormy night. That's a good example of, I think, pathetic fallacy, where, I mean, that's normally found in literature, but it's where we're attributing human emotion and feelings and thoughts to the natural world.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to mention that because that always strikes me that the weather was perfectly timed for that.
Yeah. Really set the mood.
Exactly. So I guess I'll take us to scene 2, which is in the office. Cece's there, and then Fran basically comes in, "Hi, Miss Babcock," and Cece just kind of looks at her like, because clearly Fran is not her favorite person, as we've kind of hinted at or explicitly said previously. Maxwell isn't here, and if it's about the children, I'm not interested. If it's about you, I'm really not interested. Is how she greets Fran, and Fran explains, "No, no, no, I'm just here for a little girl talk." "With me?" says Cece. "Yeah, we're both women. I don't care what Niles says. So tell me, who does he got up in that room?" And Cece gets this smile on her face. It's just killing you that Maxwell and I have little secrets that you know nothing about. And like she seems to be gloating, but Fran sees right through that. And basically, Maxwell didn't tell her either. And obviously, Cece is also upset that she doesn't know, calls Maxwell a tight lipped little sconehead. And Fran points out that it's because we're women. And Cece says, "It's outrageous men think they can't trust us." "It's insulting," says Fran. "Did you check the safe?" "Oh, it's the first place I looked." So clearly this is not great behavior on their part.
Yeah.
Um, so like Fran takes a bobby pin or some other hairpin out of her hair to try to start like opening the filing cabinet, and then Cece finds the black box, his laptop computer, and so she like opens it. We'll talk about that laptop later.
Yeah.
Um, but she's like clearly trying to break in, and who walks in but Maxwell. And Fran, of course, like immediately closes the filing cabinet. She sits on top of it to cover what she was doing. "Babs, baby. Babs, honey." "No, no, no, it's all right," says Cece. "I do this all the time. How do you think I know where he is every minute of the day?" "What's his password?" "Busted," says Maxwell. "Oh no, Maxwell would never." "Oh, Maxwell, I was looking for the file. Oh, I remember where." And she like gets herself out of the room. She's like, "I
Mhm.
remember where I left that." And Maxwell shouts after her, "Stay out of the guest room." And so, then he turns to Fran. She's like, "Boy, you'd think she'd have better things to do with her time than rifling through your stuff." And so he sits on his desk. She's still on the filing cabinet. And he starts basically pleasantly asking her, basically, "What are you doing here?" Um,
Mhm.
he asks after the kids. "The kids are wonderful." "Is the household running okay?" "Like clockwork." "Is anything on fire?" "Nope, nothing." And then he says, "Then get out." Because
Mhm.
clearly he thinks she was doing exactly what she was doing. Then she of course
Mhm.
tries to say she wasn't. She says something like, "You probably think I'm snooping around like Miss Babcock. Let me tell you something. It's pretty sad that a man in your position doesn't even know who he can trust." And then she gets up and walks out of the room, and her filing cabinet is dragged by her skirt because in her haste to close it, clearly the skirt got
Mhm.
caught. So yeah. Is there
Yeah.
anything you want to add to that?
Well, it was just amusing, like how Cece tries to get out of the situation. Like she's just like, "Oh, better go," runs out, starts going one way, don't go to the guest room, starts running the other way.
Hmm.
Yeah. I was surprised because at first I thought that because they mentioned the safe, right? So
Yep.
initially, when Fran's leaving that room, I thought it was the safe that had closed back up on her skirt, and I was like, "Why would you have a safe on rolling?"
No,
That was very easily removed.
correct. The safe is built into the wall behind the painting. We'll see it later in
Yeah,
other episodes.
but that was just one of those things where, like, I missed the reference to the filing cabinet. I was under the impression it was the safe. I was like, "That's pretty poor, like, security right there."
Yeah. Yeah, that would be really bad security. Sort of defeating the
Yeah,
purpose of a safe.
exactly. But yeah, so the next scene, we're in the kitchen, and Fran is looking through a tabloid like kind of thing, right? The
Yep.
scandal sheets, trying to figure out which celebrity it might be. She's using a process of elimination.
Yes.
Oh, Bonnie, oh, she's in court. Melanie Griffith, oh, court. Christy Brinkley, court. then starts just saying court, 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 rehab, all of this. And then she obviously reaches one of those articles about, supernatural kind of things because she's like, baby born with antlers? Oh, that's the and I can't say this word correctly.
Wow, that sounds
That's
like the episiotomy from hell.
yes. Mhm. Yeah, and it
Yeah, it
does.
does. It really does.
Oh, ooh. Um,
That sounds just
and she had been talking with
ugh,
Niles about this, right? Well,
correct.
Brighton walks in and he has a cage with a bird in it.
Yes.
And we learn that Brian has a very poor record with his pets. They've all died. He's had goldfish, hamsters, uh, a white turtle, I think what they
White
said,
mice and the
white mice,
turtle.
a turtle, and basically the backyard is an animal graveyard. But Fran notes the roses grew really well this
Correct.
season. And Maggie, of course, when she walks in, sees the bird. It's a parrot, like trying to teach the parrot Polly won an afterlife,
Right.
teasing Brighton again on his track record with animals. And Brighton explains that, it was his friend's bird, and he had to get rid of it, because it only said one thing: Raymond loves Lola. And of course, it turns out Raymond's the dad and Lola's the maid,
The upstairs maid.
the upstairs maid. And uh, Niles is like, does it deserve to die for that? I think before,
Yeah. Yeah.
with just being saying one word, does it deserve to die for that? Well, turns out Raymond's the dad and Lola's the upstairs maid.
Mhm.
Uh, so, I believe Fran's still discussing some other celebrities with her. She's still stuck on this whole trying to figure out who it is. Um, Roseanne, Laverne. There's been a party held. There's a conversation between Fran and Niles about what do you serve at that kind of party.
The party, to clarify, was Roseanne was throwing a party to burn the Arnold Tom crap, the Tom tattoo off her butt.
Ah,
That's what it
okay.
was.
Thank you for that clarification. I did not catch the exact nature of the party.
Yeah.
Um,
And so the
but
question
then,
was, what do you serve at a party like that? And Fran's like, I don't know. Was it her cousin's bris? They served tri-tip.
yeah, yep. And then she kind of looks at what Niles has been preparing for the mysterious celebrity. And, it looks like a smoothie to us, right? And she's like, why are you feeding that to her? Because she knows it's a her. Um, Make a sandwich. This is a sandwich. Apparently, this mysterious celebrity has to eat everything through a straw. And it's very disturbing, apparently. Niles likens it to in Silence of the Lambs, the
Yeah.
noise. And so Fran tries to, she offers, well, you've done so, I can handle that noise. Why don't I take it up? And of course, Niles is like, no, you're not getting by with that. Um,
Right.
and Maxwell comes in again, and of course, Fran, Fran's kind of telling Niles, like, aren't you upset that he hasn't told you a secret? And at this point, my DVD kind of froze and it skipped forward a couple of seconds, but I'm assuming she's told at that point that actually Maxwell had told Niles.
So Niall says, unlike you, I don't care.
Hmm.
I don't care. Unlike you, I don't care who it is. And Fran's like, "Oh, you know."
Okay, yeah, that's the part that was skipped over by my DVD. Um, and Maxwell comes in, and she, of course, is like, "Why did you tell Niles and not me?" And Maxwell points out, "Well, Niles wasn't doing a conga line with my filing cabinet."
Bingo.
And she's like, "Haven't I told you it was static cling?"
Yeah. I think she says something like, I knew you misread that.
Yeah,
Like she had been thinking about how to explain it.
yeah. And that's when Maxwell kind of starts going into the stereotypical, why is it that women always want to know other people's business so that they can tell that to other women, like who's,
Whose business it also isn't.
yeah, exactly. And Fran's like, well, isn't that the most sexist thing I've heard? And Maxwell, like, men don't gossip and stuff. But of course, immediately, as is often the case in the show,
Hmm.
Niles mentions, "Oh, I heard from the butler that the little Chippy, he's the little Chippy, right?"
So what Niall says is absolutely not. I turned out when the Turnbull's butler started to tell me about the little chippy the master has on the side.
Mhm. And then
Go ahead.
Maxwell jumps in like, "Oh, I heard he got her an apartment in Trump Tower." And then turns out it's all done in leather. Like they're obviously gossiping. And so
Correct.
Fran kind of comes up in the middle of them. Which one of you girls getting the bikini wax?
Right.
Yep. So, do you have anything to add?
Nothing important. So
Okay. Take us to the next scene.
I'd love to. So now we're upstairs and we're in the guest room, and all's quiet because the house guest is asleep. And then the door opens. Fran has like a credit card and has forcibly opened the door, saying, "I'm sorry. Did you call me?" And she realizes the person's asleep. "Oh, good. You're sleeping. Shh, shh, shh.
Mhm.
Lullaby." And she starts like examining the person and she's singing a lullaby, lullaby, and good night. You're too short to be Candace Bergen. La la
Mhm.
la la. And then she lifts the the quilt, the blanket off the person. Rule out Dolly Parton too, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
sorry, I stopped singing. I probably should have continued. Oh well. And then Fran sort of talking to the sleeping celebrity, you're very brave. Surgery's not for me. I'll stick with my thigh cream. It tingles cellulite away. I don't know if it works, but I don't hate it. And so,
Mhm.
like, she's continuing to snoop, trying to figure out who the person is. And Gracie sneaks up on her and asks, "Did you figure out who it is yet?" And of course, A, Fran was startled, and B, she says, "Honey, what if I always told you about snooping?" And Gracie quickly volunteers that there should always be a lookout. "Good," says Fran. "Go wait in the hall." And so Fran continues examining the sleeping celebrity, opening one of the eyes, brown eyes, tries to like look at the person's teeth, puts her finger in the person's mouth, and because this person's been eating everything through a straw, she starts sucking on Fran's finger. And
Mhm.
Fran says, "Not a straw. Oh, honey, what were you worried about your looks for?" You know,
Uh-huh.
that's one of those comments that when we watch this as children, we would not have understood.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and well, needless to say, all good things, or in this case, stupid things, must come to an end. Maxwell walks by, basically, "What the hell are you doing?" And at that point, Fran's able to get her finger out. Up, temperature normal. Maxwell drags her outside, and Fran start. I don't know. Do you want me to continue, or did you consider this its own scene?
You can continue if you want. It all kind of flows together.
Okay. Um, I put it as the same scene, so I'll just finish it up. Um, and Fran's line of defense is, "Well, I hope you don't think this was my fault." And he's like, "I suppose it was my fault," very sarcastically. And she's like, "Well, I forgive you."
Mhm.
They're outside. They're now in the hallway, and Fran starts explaining, "None of this would have happened if you had just told me who she was." At this point, our masked house guest is standing in the door watching them, and she says, "Share." And Fran thinks Share, not Cher. And
Mhm.
so Fran explains, says to Maxwell, "Well, sharing is what it's all about." And again, the house guest says, "Share." And Fran says, "I know. Don't tell me. Tell him. I give and give." And Maxwell says to who we now know is Cher, "She's really very good with children." But,
Mhm.
but, interjects Fran, "do you think that earns his trust? He still won't tell me who you are." And the
Mhm.
house guest says, "Share." Like, totally
Mhm.
exacerbated. Like, I've already identified myself.
Mhm.
Like, just listen.
Mhm.
So Is there
Yeah.
anything you want to add?
Well, then she goes on to try to like specify like Grammy, Emmy, Oscar, and then Fran starts freaking out. Rita Marino?
Oh, right.
Again, Fran did not really catch
No,
the
no, which
multiple times she was told. It kind of reminds me of like, did you ever watch Dude, Where's My Car
no.
as a kid? Okay. There's a scene where this is sidetrack, obviously. They each discover they have a new tattoo on their backs. So they're asking each other what it says, and one of them says dude and one of them says sweet. But that's things they say often. So they keep thinking the other person's just like complimenting or whatever and not actually telling, and it goes on forever.
So
That's
it's sort of like the who's on first routine.
who's on first?
Yeah, I take it that there was a question mark at the end of your
Question
set.
mark? Yes.
What did I say? Yes, question mark. Um,
Yes.
sorry. It's a very famous. Was it Abbott and Costello? Costello.
Oh,
Like script. Um, yeah, it's Abbott and Costello who's on first, and it's according to our friends at Wikipedia, it's a comedy routine. The premise of the sketch is that Abbott is identifying the players on a baseball team for Costello, but the players' names simultaneously serve as the basis for the question. So, who is the first baseman? And the response to the first baseman's name is who.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you for your patience, listeners. As we
Go off on a slight tangent.
correct.
But
Would
yeah.
you like to take us into the kitchen then? Unless
Yeah.
you've
So yeah, we're back in the kitchen. Brighton is trying to teach the bird a new saying, which is Maggie stuffs her bra because he is Brighton.
correct.
And Niles is kind of chiding him or whatever. And, why must you torture that poor bird? And Niles at that time is making Cornish hens. So Brighton says, well, at least this bird's having a better day than that Cornish hen. You have your hand up. And she's like,
Fist in. Yeah.
Yep. And then as soon as Brighton exits, Niles approaches the bird and says, okay, let's pick up where we left off. So obviously, this is not the first time he's done this.
Correct. And did you
Miss
see what
Bab,
he did before he walked over?
uh, what?
So, as you pointed out, he was stuffing the Cornish hen. He picks one of them up, covers it with, was it a pot holder or something, or a towel, and then
Mhm.
walks over.
Okay, yeah. And he starts saying, Miss Babcock, Miss Badcock, I can't say it.
Miss
Miss
Babcock's
Babcock's
embezzling.
embezzling.
Correct.
Yeah. And in walk Fran and Mr.
Maxwell.
Max. Yeah, Mr. Maxwell. I can't talk tonight. I'm so sorry, listeners. But anyway, they walk in, and Fran, of course, is still freaking out. Can't believe Cher sucked on my finger.
Right.
Yeah. And my notes here, it says die.
Yeah. So Fran says, after she's still so excited about Cher sucking on her finger, you know who would just die if they found
Yeah.
out Cher was here?
You is Mr.
You, Miss
Sheffield.
Fine, you would die. And
Mhm.
Fran just like totally ignores him and keeps like smiling and
Yeah,
then go
and
ahead.
she talks about her cousin Ira,
Yes.
who is apparently an impersonator of Cher, and he has this great Bob Mackie dress, and that made me think of the previous episodes where I believe Fran had a Bob Mackie dress, correct?
Correct. Ode to Barbara Joan.
Hmm. And of course, it turns out though, like Cher's all famous, and Ira's just a kosher butcher,
Correct.
um, but he's something out of Queens.
The
What's the
best female impersonator to come out of Queens, no pun intended.
Mhm. And again, she's trying to convey that, she can keep a secret. Who's she gonna tell? Maxwell leaves. The side door of the kitchen opens, and there's Val.
Hi,
So
Fran.
yes. immediately, who is she going to tell? Well, Val, of course. I can't tell you. And Val's like, what? I can't tell you about the celebrities who's recovering upstairs.
Right.
Okay. Uh, um, and then Fran has a soda. So Val's like, oh, can I have a soda? And Fran's like, oh, there's only one. So we're going to have to share. Oh, you know, eyes
Right.
wide. Uh, and then she tries to redirect the conversation like, oh, have your parents gotten their timeshare? Oh, again, another eyes wide.
Yep.
And Val explains no, because they don't like Florida. Why? It's nice and sunny. Oh.
Exactly.
Sunny and Cher. Um, and it's apparently a bad neighborhood. Oh, is it full of gypsies, tramps, and thieves? It's Cher. Who told you?
Exactly. This is one of the very few moments where Val's brain cells are working.
Mm-hmm. Yep, she put it together. Good for
Exactly.
her, bad for Friends.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to take us, or did you have anything to add to that?
Nothing relevant. So in the next scene, we learn from Maggie, who's talking to Fran, that the house is surrounded by report. Oh, actually, I take it back. Even before we hear from them. Oh no, sorry, listeners. In case you can't tell, we are recording a little bit later than we normally do, and needless to say, our brains are a little tired. I take it back. So at the beginning of the scene, we have Fran and Maggie talking, and Maggie comments about how the house is surrounded by reporters. And Fran says, well, I wouldn't say surrounded, just on 3 sides and on the second floor balcony. That sounds pretty surrounded to me.
Mm-hmm.
How about to you, Bernadette?
Yeah.
Do you agree that that's surrounded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
And so then it cuts
Yeah.
to outside where we see the massive reporters, and Cece and Maxwell and Niles are trying to get through them into the house. And Niles has like a garbage can lid and I think an umbrella. Back,
I think
back,
like
you journalistic spawn of Satan. And he like
his
pushes
sword and
them.
shield.
Exactly. And then after that, he says, "Thank you very much and have a nice day." And they like step inside, and Maxwell just kind of looks at him. Niles explains, "One must be firm, but never rude." And then
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell points out, "I think you left Miss Babcock out there." Oh, did I? Like
Mm-hmm.
Niles clearly knew he had done it. He was gleeful. He opens the door, and there's Cece in her great, olive green trench coat, and she's like clinging to the wrought iron design on the door.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so they come into the house, and Fran has basically tried to run for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, Maxwell says, "Miss Fine, are you talking to me?" She pops her head out. "Miss Fine, you've got some splaining to do." And so she
Yep.
comes. And basically her explanation is, they could have found out in a million different ways, such as, and that's when Brighton, I think, walks in holding the bird in the cage, saying that the bird, "Hey guys, the bird, picked something else up." Not now was Maxwell's, general demeanor. And Fran's like, "Oh, you need to make time for the kids, like pay attention." And so Maxwell sort of relents, and then, Fran and everyone's looking at the bird, and Fran says, "Speak, pretty bird." And the bird says, "Oh, it's Cher. Could you plot?" And it sounds like, needless to say, from that, Maxwell concludes that it was Fran's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I don't have anything to add, so I'll take us to the office
Perfect.
where Fran and Val are sitting on the couch. And Fran's like, Val, like, how could you? I only told one person. Who? The priest. My priest. Was he wearing his collar? No. I told you, if they're not wearing their collar, it's like they're having their fingers crossed. By the way, side note, that's not how it works, but
Did you also catch what Fran called the priest?
Yentas?
A yenta? That
Yenta, yeah.
Yenta,
Mhm.
which again,
Uh,
probably not what you would think of to call a priest, but
nope. So, again, they're, like, saying how it's as if they've been called into the principal's office, and, um, apparently, they've been through this a lot, and Fran
yes,
says, "Okay, um, basically, I'll make up the story, and you have to, like, just keep with it,
stick with
um,
it.
stick with it." Oh, I'm supposed to stick with it? Um, but Fran's like, "Oh, no, I'm gonna get suspended."
Right.
Maxwell comes in, and they stood up. "Sit." They sit down, and he has glasses on too by this point. And he
Yes.
says, "I am most disappointed in you two ladies." Um, "Oh, no, we're not getting into college."
And
Um,
then they laugh.
yes. "Are you laughing?" Um, and he expected more from them. Val starts crying. "Oh, tears won't get me." "Oh, no, he's gonna call my mother." And again, Fran kind of says it's not Val's fault. I'll take the rap again because that's
Yup.
obviously their old pattern. And Val, immediately gets up and says she needs to go to confession. And Fran yells after her, "No names."
Right.
And Maxwell is like, like, "Miss Fine, like, Cher's now a virtual prisoner in her home." And Fran's like, "Well, if I come up with a plan that'll solve everything, would you forgive me?" And he's like, "Yes." And she's like, "Got any ideas?"
Exactly.
So
Although,
she was a little ahead of herself.
right, because actually what she says is Mr. Sheffield, and she says this very like confidently. If I told you I had a way to solve everything, would you forgive me? Like as if she already had it, which is why it's so
Yes,
funny when she's like, "Got any ideas?"
mm-hmm. Yep. Got anything to add?
No, but I am curious since you said it it that to the if he's not wearing his collar, it's like he has his fingers crossed behind his back. You said that's not how it works. Uh,
I don't think so. First of all, if she went to confession, like, he would probably have his collar on anyway, but I don't think the priest would just go around gossiping if it's a confession.
I would hope not, but
Yeah.
figured you might want to add
Yeah,
anything to
it's
that.
not
So
they're not going around crossing their fingers because they don't have their collars on.
apparently, this one priest takes his role a little bit more lackadaisically. So
Yeah.
so I guess I'll take us to the living room. Um,
Mhm.
Maxwell is talking to an assembled group of reporters who are now in the house, not outside it. And Maxwell greets them with, "All right, ladies and gentlemen of the press, Cher has agreed to this photo opportunity in the hopes that you might finally agree to leave her alone. All right, thank you very much." And he steps off, and there's excitement clearly in the air. Um, and Fran explains to Maxwell like that it'll be fine. My cousin Ira will do a few bits from his act before the press gets wise. Cher will be out the kitchen door and back to pushing detangler on QVC. And Maxwell's clearly nervous about this. Gracie comes in and Fran asks, "Is he ready?" And Gracie's response is, "He's dressed like a lady." And Fran's like, "I'll explain everything later. Thank you." And like sends Gracie on her way. And she
Mhm.
looks at Maxwell and Maxwell looks sort of pained. And he shares, "I was just thinking, before you came into my life, I never had the need for an emergency transvestite." And I'm going to pause here and say that language is no longer politically correct, I believe. So I hope I did not offend anybody by quoting the show, but this is one of the things we talk about later with it being dated. Um,
Mhm.
Back to the discussion. Fran explains, "It can't fail. Besides, there's no time to think of anything else." Um,
Mhm.
and so basically, Fran has the boombox and a tape. She presses play, and who should come out at the top of the staircase? Cousin Ira, dressed like Cher. Um, and already know what you're going to say. Maxwell's
Yep.
reaction is not particularly great.
Nope.
Um, he said he everyone's mouths are basically on the floor except for Fran, who knew what cousin Ira looked like. Um, and Maxwell says, "Where was the last place he passed for Cher? SeaWorld?"
Hmm.
Like, not a great comment.
Yeah. Because
Um,
for our listeners, if you haven't seen this episode lately, he is a larger man. Like he does have shares like hair, makeup, that kind of stuff. But
outfit.
he's clearly not Cher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Fran's explanation is, "Oh, well, Cher just had surgery, so we'll tell them that she's still on cortisone."
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, is do you want to add anything, or do you want to?
Yeah, because like cousin Ira is like lip syncing to a Cher song, and actually Fran at the beginning too, before Maxwell's making his comments, is singing along with him,
Yeah.
like the bang bang. But yeah. Um. So we go to the kitchen next, and not too pleased with the exchange that occurs here either.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because yeah, well, because essentially Cher was able to make her escape, right?
Yes.
While cousin Ira was distracting everybody. Um, but you know, sh- Fran's saying, "Oh, but the press loved cousin Ira." Um, and then there's like all these exchanges, like how his thong was made out of a hammock, and the leotard apparently failed. And Fran's like, "Yeah, I've seen runs, but never a blowout." Um, so not great.
Mm-mm.
I'm not a fan of this exchange. But anyway, the point is Cher did get out safe and sound.
Right.
And Maxwell is kind of like, "Have you learned anything, Miss Fine, about idle female gossip?" And, in walks in though the father of Brighton's friend who had the bird that he had to get rid of, Raymond.
Correct.
And he's there to retrieve the bird, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, like, I hope the press didn't give you too much trouble because I'm the one who tipped them off."
Right.
What? Yeah. "Oh, Max told me in the steam room. You said you wouldn't tell. And you said you wouldn't talk about my girlfriend in Trump Tower." Um, so
I guess that
obviously,
makes us square.
yep, yep. And then I can't make out my last thing. Oh,
Maxwell.
"Good night, Miss Fine," or "Good
Correct.
day." Like he's trying to make his escape, and Fran does not let him because obviously it was Maxwell who leaked this by not
Correct.
keeping it a secret.
Correct. And
Mhm.
after all the things he said about idle female gossip,
Mhm. Yes. And I will note too, earlier in the conversation, I believe Fran was talking about, oh, the press loved cousin Ira, but cousin Ira's having trouble hailing a taxi, and that comes into re- relevance this next scene.
I didn't actually take any notes on the next scene, so I guess I'll let you do it.
Okay. It's just the end credits, and it's cousin Ira still in the Cher costume, trying to hail a cab. And as soon as a cab approaches, it like speeds off, and cousin Ira's running after the cab. So not great either. Like I feel like to me, general sense, like it got more problematic towards the end. But I don't know if you have a particular opinion about that, Debbie.
I mean, this is not. Yeah, I'll agree. It's sort of problematic through most of it, actually.
Yeah. Well, because the other thing I would note is Gracie's face when she says he's dressed like a lady. Her face is kind of like disgusted. I don't
I
know
took
if
it
that's
more as confused.
okay. Because there's like I don't know. It came off more than just confused to me, but I could be wrong. I could be reading too much into it.
Well, also keep in mind you're reading it with 2022 eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
like
anyway,
go back.
there was no a cousin Ire became a punchline, which I don't think is great to do.
No, no, and I think this will probably, why don't we, I think this conversation is going to bleed into the 90s nostalgia. I don't think this episode would be made today.
No, no, I don't think so.
And so I think that's something we have to keep in mind as we watch it, that it was created for an audience almost 30 years ago.
Hmm.
And in some regards, our society has changed significantly.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah. 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 Let's just jump into the shtick, Steffi.
sure. You wanted to start with 90s nostalgia since
Yeah,
that,
because that's at the forefront of this, as you mentioned, just in general. But you also mentioned before the laptop.
yeah.
Wow, it's like a brick.
Yeah, so for those who haven't seen it recently, my guess is you're probably used to seeing a relatively flat, slick, nice, aerodynamic looking laptop of some kind. This is the opposite. Think, as Bernadette put it, a brick. It's
Yeah.
thick, it's chunky, it looks heavy.
Yeah. Yep. Um, but again, I remember back then, like how that would have been, ooh, state of the art, fancy.
Right. Um,
But
to
also, like, go ahead.
go ahead.
You go ahead, Debbie. I
All
insist.
all right, thank you. I was just gonna say, but I mean, as you put it, back then, yes, that was clearly state of the art, fancy. And now today it's sort of like, huh, what an interesting, do nothing. What an interesting paperweight
Yeah. Yep. But again, Fran's using a boombox for cousin Ira's scene.
with a tape.
Today, yeah, if you were to like do something similar today, it'd probably be just her phone streaming music.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I'm just gonna mention the size of the pizza box. I don't think you can get a pizza box that big, at least not at 90s prices anymore.
well,
Um,
Costco.
but they won't deliver.
That's true.
So
That's true. Yeah.
my mom likes to comment on how large pizzas have gotten smaller,
Mhm.
and more expensive. But
Yeah.
so that's what I think of. Go ahead.
I'm gonna steal it from you. We do
That's
see
fine.
old cars.
That was what I was going to say next. So great
Mhm.
minds. Um, I think that's it.
Yeah. Well, and I would say another thing would be, um, I think there would be more like once the secret's out, it would be more widespread today in terms of like social media and
Mhm.
stuff. And it wouldn't necessarily just be reporters at the door, but any old person could be on the street with their phone waiting to catch a
True.
glimpse. So,
True.
yeah. Favorite fashion? Or did you have any more 90s nostalgia?
I'm out on 90s nostalgia. But for fashion, I don't really think there was anything. No, I mean, obviously cousin Ira's outfit, but
Hmm.
I, I don't really think I had fashion that I
So,
particularly liked.
yeah, what was interesting is the first couple of outfits Fran wore were all kind of a variation of this like red and black plaid
Yeah,
and red and white, or sorry, black and white, um, which I thought was interesting that there are just at least three outfits that incorporated those elements to it.
that's a good point. I mean, so in what I remember, there's the black turtleneck with the red plaid dress over it, and then there's
Hmm.
the red skirt that gets bitten, I guess, by the filing cabinet.
Hmm.
Um,
And there's at least one more.
yeah, I
Uh,
think it's a white shirt with a red skirt, but I
mhm.
could be mistaken.
Yeah, but I just happened to notice that there was obviously some type of like theme or like pattern that was being used.
Right.
Okay.
Is there any fashion you wanted to talk about?
Not particularly. So we can move on to notable New Yorkers.
Sure. There were a bunch in
Hmm.
this episode. Would you like to
Yeah,
start?
and I feel like some of them I couldn't even write down quick enough. Um, because again, like whenever Fran's just naming off people trying to guess who the celebrity is.
Right.
So I'll let you go first this time, Debbie.
Okay. So 60 Minutes, you've
Mhm.
already mentioned. So that is the self-proclaimed, and I quote, most successful broadcast in television history that offers hard-hitting investigative reports, interviews, feature segments, and profiles of the people in the news. That's according to 60 Minutes webpage. There's Alfred Hitchcock, referenced by
Mhm.
Niles. He was one of the most influential figures in cinema. He was known as the master of suspense, and he directed over 50 feature films, in which he appeared in many. I still can't figure out how to get that sentence right. He appeared in many of his feature films in a
There
cameo.
you go.
Yeah, I'll just make it a new sentence. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. King Tut was an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. He was the last of his family to rule in the 18th century 18th dynasty. He ascended the throne at age 8 or 9. His parents were brother and sister. He married his half sister, and they had 2 kids who both died. That's according to Wikipedia.
Mhm.
Would you like to jump in, or shall I keep going?
There's Mission Impossible, um,
Which is,
a movie
you're
with Tom
wrong.
Cruise. Oh, different?
Actually, I mean, technically, you are right. Yes, there is a movie called Mission Impossible, but that came out in 1996.
I was wondering. I was like, I feel this is a little early for
So
it. So different. Okay.
Mission Impossible, the film is actually based on a television series by the same name. The Mission Impossible
Interesting.
television series ran for 7 years in the 1960s and 1970s, and it's a show about a group of secret government agents. And that's according, again, to our friends at Wikipedia. Sorry, in fairness, I did set you up for that one. So
Yes,
sorry.
that was the perfect setup.
Thank you. Thank you. I tried.
So is that Martin Kando a part of that then? Is
I
that
thought
a
it was
reference to that?
Martin Lando.
Lando. Yes, I can't read my writing. It's been a long week already.
It's been a long week, and we can't tell you why, and we won't.
It's a secret.
Exactly. Martin Lando was an American actor, producer, editorial cartoonist, and acting coach whose career actually started by appearing in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest in 1959.
Mhm. So again, we kind of already mentioned that Fran lists off a bunch of different celebrities when she's trying to narrow down who it might be. She says Lonnie.
Do you know who that is?
So it like sounds familiar, but like I don't know who specifically she is
Yeah,
referring to.
I I did a search for Lonnie, and clearly Lonnie can be spelled multiple ways.
Hmm.
Um, and on Wikipedia, they had a list of different people named Lonnie.
Hmm.
Um, and the only one that I thought maybe would have been Lonnie Kellner, who is a German singer or actress, but that sort of seems like it's totally out of left field.
Yeah, because
So
she also mentions like Melanie Griffith, Christy Brinkley. Um,
Roseanne and Tom.
yeah. So, and I don't know if I think Christy Brinkley's come up before, hasn't she?
I think so as well.
Hmm.
Um, as a reminder, she's an American actress, model, and entrepreneur.
Hmm.
Melanie Griffith is an American producer and actress who started her career in the 1970s doing independent thrillers, according to our friends at Wikipedia. Roseanne Barr,
Hmm.
an American actress, comedian, writer, and former candidate for president. She's best known for the title role on the sitcom Roseanne. Um, Tom Arnold is her former husband. They got divorced in 1994, hence the burning the Tom tattoo off her butt comment.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Um, I won't get into any of the more recent things.
Yeah.
Um, we'll we'll talk about that in future fun.
Hmm.
Um, would you like
Yeah.
to continue?
Silence of the Lambs is a movie.
1991 psychological horror film starring Jodie Foster, which is about an FBI trainee who is hunting Buffalo Bill, a serial killer who likes to skin his female victims, using advice of Hannibal Lecter, a serial killer and cannibal. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Sounds very scary.
Hmm.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Now, again, whenever Fran goes into the room, she notes in her lullaby that's not Candace Bergen.
An American actress and former fashion model, most known for her role on Boston Legal.
And she mentions Dolly Parton. I think
Mm-hmm.
has Dolly come up before
I don't think
in the
so.
show? Okay, so this is the first appearance of Dolly Parton.
Yeah, so she's an American actress, singer, songwriter, and businesswoman who's most known for her work in country music and most recently the development of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Cher. Cher.
Not Share.
Exactly.
She's an American actress, singer, and television personality who is known as the goddess of pop.
Mhm. And then again, another reference to Rita Marino, who was in a previous episode
She
as the
was,
gym teacher.
yeah, Sonny, reference to Sonny Bono, who was Cher's husband and
Mhm.
partner. He's an American actor, singer, and politician. Apparently, he was the mayor of Palm Springs, California, for a while, according to our friends at
Mhm.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, and there's also references to some of Cher's songs, like "Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves" is
Yep,
one of her songs.
Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down
Mhm.
is another one.
Yeah,
Um,
but when Maxwell comes in, Miss Fine, you have some splaining to do. That's clearly a reference to the famous Ricky Ricardo line in "I Love Lucy." Of Lucy, you got some splaining to do.
so interestingly, so I knew that was the reference as well. I knew it was to I Love Lucy. When I Googled it, apparently, according to MeTV.com, they had an article on 9 famous TV catchphrases that were never actually said on the shows.
Ooh,
And you got some splaining to do was never actually said. It was a paraphrase of things like Lucy, splain, or Lucy, explain that if you can.
interesting.
So it's interesting that it's so
Well, I mean, the classic Star Wars, like it's not Luke, I am your father, but everybody says that, you know,
right. I also thought it was Luke, I am your father, but
it's not.
I'm not a Star Wars fan, so
Yeah. It's interesting how, though, like uh, phrases morph and the pop culture references.
right.
Yeah.
Do you have any others?
Trying to look quickly.
All's Well That Ends Well is a play by William Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Boot Hill, that is, according to our friends at Wikipedia, the name of many cemeteries in the Western United States. It's a common name for burial grounds of gunfighters, or also known as those who died with their boots on. That's a
Oh,
direct
interesting.
quote. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I
The,
think I'm
the,
out.
the last reference I had was QVC, but I didn't get a chance to put together a
That's like
more specific.
isn't that like a home shopping network kind of thing?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to put together something a little more detailed than that. Um, so I think that's it.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool
So
beans.
Yiddish cop.
So we had a couple different things. One would be a bris. We've already talked about that. That's Brit Milah. That's the ceremony performed 8 days after a baby boy is born, bringing him into the covenant. The word yenta we've covered before. It's basically a busybody, someone who likes to put their nose in everyone else's business. Plots, which is what the bird says. We also a word we've covered before. Basically means to burst, like you're so full of something you burst. And then the last reference is to a kosher butcher, which is Ira's uh, other profession, I guess. Um, Basically, the reason you'd have a kosher butcher is because in order for meat to be kosher and therefore fit for consumption, it has to be prepared in a certain way, and the animal has to be slaughtered in a certain way. Um, so yeah, and we've talked previously about a butcher, Paul Zelaznik, the one who was leaving Sylvian notes in the chicken.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's it. Was there anything that I missed?
Um, I don't believe so. I think you got them.
Excellent. I
So
love
can
it
you
when I
give us
get
some
them.
future? Yeah. Can you give us some future fun?
Sure. So a couple different things. One, I want to mention that Roseanne Barr actually guest stars as Fran's cousin in season 5, which, considering some of the things that have happened since the nanny has not been on the air, I don't think would happen today. I just wanted to
Mhm.
mention that. You referenced the letter that Maxwell had given Fran to deliver. In the episode where Elizabeth Taylor is a guest star, they try to get Fran out of the house by asking her um, to deliver something, a package of papers to Antonia Banderas or to John John. Needless to say, she sees right through that and doesn't leave the house and gets to meet Elizabeth Taylor.
Mhm.
Kind of with something we've talked about previously, the whole, layout of the house likes to shift over time. Um, I believe in a later episode, I think the guest bedroom is oriented the other way. But as I'm saying that, I'm wondering if it's actually a different bedroom. So we'll put a pin in
It's
that.
hard to say. I can't tell how many rooms it's supposed to have,
Right,
the house.
right. It it's a magical house. It has as many rooms as is necessary for that day.
Just how it shifts depending on the needs.
Exactly. And then I guess the last future fun I'll mention, here, you know, basically most of the plot, a lot of the plot was driven by this idea of Fran being a gossip.
Mhm.
There is an episode in season 5 where Maxwell has a famous actress agree to star as like the title character in his new play. And Fran is dying to meet her. Well, needless to say, it doesn't go as well as Fran expects because Fran dresses up as the gardener and ends up accidentally spraying her with a garden hose, and her trademark mole comes off because it's a fake.
Ooh.
And so it's very clear that no one can ever know this. Guess what? Fran shares with her mother, and what she makes the mistake of sharing this with her mother at the doctor's office. And I believe it's Liz Smith or a similar gossip columnist overhears, cancels her doctor's appointment, and has it be her headline news. And Maxwell basically says to Fran that he can't have a relationship with her if he can't trust her.
Mm.
So I won't say anything further, but I just wanted to mention that.
Mhm.
Shall we jump into the rating? Is it my turn? It's my turn, isn't
No,
it?
it's my turn.
Oh, thank goodness.
I struggle. I struggle. Hmm. I'm
Well,
still struggling.
while you're thinking, I will just make a note that the little cage in which the parrot came is too small for a bird like that. I'm pretty sure I've never had a parrot like that, but my understanding is they're not supposed to really be in cages like that. They're supposed to, be allowed to fly, flap their
Yeah.
wings and things like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm still waffling here. I'll just go with the 3.
You and I are very much in tune because I was just thinking she's going to do a 3. She's going to give it a 3.
Yeah. Yeah, again, a lot of it's in 2022, looking at it, problematic. So I'll just leave it at that. How about you, Debbie?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 3.5.
Okay.
And that's mainly because, yeah, it is problematic, but it some parts of it are also very funny. Like the part, and by that I mean the parts that are not problematic are also very fun, are funny. Strike also. Um, like for example, the first scene when the kids are watching the horror film, and Brighton says, "Oh, Fran thinks this is scary," and then Fran jumps out from behind the couch, boom, and they shriek. That's funny.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. Again, this is not one of those episodes that I like go out of my way to rewatch. Um, it is, when you look at it with a critical eye, it is problematic for a variety of reasons. Um, I don't really like Maxwell not trusting Fran and Cece because he thinks they're gossips. I'm
Mhm.
not crazy about the trying to train the poor parrot um to say Maggie stuffs her bra or Miss Babcock's embezzling.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna stick with 3.5. So slightly better than you gave it, but not as good as last week or the week before.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think I'm good. Anything you wanted to add?
Thank you, wonderful listeners, for putting up with us in our loopiness tonight, as well as our
What a struggle.
as well as for allowing us to keep our secret for why we were delayed this week. So thank you. All right, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 37, Kinderwelt Days.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.